Dopamine, the silent architect of desire, discipline, and meaning. Have you ever wondered why you want what you want? Why a small notification can pull your attention away from something important? Why starting something new feels exciting, but continuing it feels difficult? Why success sometimes feels powerful for a moment and then strangely empty? Why the mind keeps whispering, "What's next?" even after you finally get what you once dreamed of. This book, Dopamine, the silent architect of desire, discipline, and meaning, is not simply a book about brain chemistry. It is a journey into the hidden force behind ambition, craving, curiosity, distraction, creativity, discipline, stillness, purpose, and peace. Dopamine is often misunderstood. Many people call it the pleasure chemical, but this book shows us something deeper. Dopamine is not only about pleasure, it is about prediction, it is about anticipation. It is the chemical whisper that says, "Pay attention. Something meaningful, exciting, or rewarding may be ahead." It is the invisible narrator behind our choices. It shapes what we notice, what we chase, what we avoid, what we repeat, and what we believe will finally make us happy. But the most beautiful message of this book is this: dopamine is not your enemy. It is not a villain to be destroyed. It is not a weakness to be ashamed of. It is an instrument. And like every instrument, it can create noise or music, depending on how consciously we learn to play it. This book takes us from desire to discipline, from distraction to awareness, from endless chasing to meaningful living. It helps us understand why we keep wanting, why modern life overstimulates us, and how we can train our brain to want what truly matters. Let us begin this journey. Chapter 1. The Unseen Narrator. Behind every ambition, craving, and idea introduces dopamine as the storyteller inside the brain. The chapter explains that every urge carries a story. When we feel drawn toward a task, a message, an idea, a person, or a possibility, dopamine is quietly assigning value to that moment. It is not forcing us, but it is editing our attention. It decides what looks important. It highlights certain scenes in the movie of life and says, "Look here." The chapter reminds us that awareness is the beginning of authorship. We may not control every chemical signal inside the brain, but once we notice the signal, we can redirect it. We can ask ourselves, is this the story I want my mind to keep writing? This chapter is powerful because it turns dopamine from something mysterious into something we can observe. It teaches us that freedom begins when we see the narrator. Chapter 2. The Human Hunger for What's Next explains why satisfaction rarely lasts. Human beings are designed to move forward. Our ancestors survived because they explored, hunted, searched, built, and imagined beyond the present moment. Dopamine evolved to keep us moving. It rises when we anticipate reward, and it fades after we receive it. That fading is not a personal failure. It is part of the design. The brain does not want us to remain permanently satisfied. It wants us to continue. But in the modern world, this ancient survival system can become a source of restlessness. We achieve something, enjoy it briefly, and immediately start looking for the next goal. The horizon keeps moving. This chapter teaches that restlessness is not always weakness, it is inherited. But wisdom lies in learning where to aim it. The goal is not to stop wanting. The goal is to want consciously. Chapter 3. The Dopamine Loop. Why we keep wanting reveals the cycle behind habits, cravings, and motivation. A cue appears. Dopamine rises. We pursue. We receive a reward. Then, the reward fades, and the loop waits for another cue. This loop can build mastery, or it can trap us in distraction. A short loop gives us quick stimulation, scrolling, clicking, refreshing, checking, swiping. These actions give tiny rewards, but they rarely satisfy us deeply. The brain becomes hungry for speed, not substance. A long loop, however, creates meaning. Writing a book, building a skill, training the body, designing something meaningful, raising a child, creating a business, or serving a purpose, all of these require time, patience, and effort. Long loops teach dopamine to reward the process, not just the result. This chapter gives us one of the most important lessons of the book. The loop will always run. The question is, what rhythm are we feeding it? Chapter 4, The Illusion of Control. Why We Plan But Rarely Begin explores one of the most familiar traps of modern life: overplanning. Planning feels productive, research feels productive, making lists, organizing files, preparing strategies, and imagining success can all give the brain a small dopamine reward. But sometimes that reward becomes dangerous because it tricks us into feeling that we've progressed when we have only prepared. This chapter shows how dopamine can reward the map instead of the journey. The mind loves certainty because certainty feels safe, but life does not grow inside perfect certainty. Real progress begins when we move before we feel fully ready. The chapter also explores perfectionism. Sometimes we keep polishing, adjusting, editing, improving, and delaying because finishing feels risky. Perfection becomes a beautiful form of procrastination. The message is clear. Planning is useful, but action is sacred. At some point, the map must become a step. Chapter 5. The Dopamine Mirage. When more becomes meaningless, shifts into the darker side of desire. It explains what happens when the brain receives too much stimulation too often. The more we chase pleasure, the less sensitive we may become to it. This is the law of diminishing returns. What once felt exciting becomes normal. What once felt special becomes ordinary. The brain adjusts, and then we need more to feel the same. This chapter compares modern life to an infinite buffet. We have endless entertainment, endless information, endless products, endless choices, endless opinions, and endless opportunities to stimulate ourselves. But abundance can numb appreciation. The tragedy is not that we have too much. The tragedy is that we forget how to feel awe. The chapter calls us back to depth. It reminds us that the solution is not always more pleasure, more achievement, or more stimulation. Sometimes the solution is less noise, more presence, and a renewed sensitivity to simple things. Chapter 6, Rewiring Reward, How to Train Your Brain to Want What Truly Matters, offers hope and direction. If dopamine can be trained by distraction, it can also be trained by purpose. This chapter teaches that awareness is the first rewire. When we notice an urge without obeying it immediately, we create space between impulse and action. That space is powerful. It activates the wiser part of the brain and weakens automatic habits. The chapter also explains the power of delayed gratification. Waiting is not punishment. Waiting deepens reward. When we delay small pleasures for meaningful reasons, dopamine learns patience. It begins to associate satisfaction with effort, not only with instant results. The chapter gives a practical idea. Design your reward system. Create cues, meaningful actions, small rewards, and moments of reflection. Reward yourself for showing up. Reward consistency. Reward progress. Reward alignment. This is where dopamine becomes a partner in growth instead of a driver of distraction. Chapter 7. The Dopamine-Driven Society. How the world rewards the wrong things expands the conversation from the individual mind to the world around us. Modern society is built around attention. Platforms, apps, media, advertisements, and algorithms compete for our dopamine. Every notification is a signal. Every headline is designed to trigger curiosity, fear, anger, or desire. Every scroll promises that something more interesting may appear next. This chapter shows that our attention is not just a personal resource, it is an economic resource. Companies profit when we stay engaged. The longer we anticipate, react, scroll, and click, the more valuable our attention becomes. The chapter also examines productivity culture. We often mistake busyness for meaning. A full calendar, endless meetings, constant messages, and dashboards full of numbers may create the feeling of progress, but not necessarily real impact. The antidote is human-centered design. A healthier culture would reward curiosity over consumption, depth over speed, contribution over performance, and presence over constant reaction. This chapter is a mirror. It asks us to protect our attention as if it is one of the most valuable things we own, because it is. Chapter 8. The Balance of Desire. Finding harmony between ambition and contentment is about the dance between wanting and being. Dopamine pushes us forward. Serotonin helps us feel satisfied. One gives direction, the other gives depth. Without dopamine, we may stop growing. Without contentment, we may never feel that we have arrived. This chapter explains that ambition is not the enemy. Desire can be sacred when guided by awareness, but ambition without reflection becomes anxiety. When the brain keeps asking, "What next?" and "What if this is not enough?" success begins to feel like pressure. The chapter introduces the art of enough. Enough does not mean giving up. It means allowing the mind to close the loop. It means pausing long enough to say, "This matters. This is meaningful. This is whole." Balance is not a final destination. It is a rhythm, effort and ease, pursuit and pause, growth and gratitude. The wise mind learns to move with both. Chapter 9. The Creative Spark. How Dopamine Fuels. Imagination, Innovation, and Art celebrates dopamine as the molecule of possibility. Creativity begins with the question, "What if?" Dopamine loves uncertainty, exploration, and discovery. It lights up when the mind approaches something new, surprising, or unfinished. This chapter beautifully shows that creativity is controlled chaos. Too much control kills imagination. Too much chaos kills completion. The creative brain needs both wandering and structure. It needs the storm of ideas and the calm of design. The chapter also explores flow, that beautiful state where time disappears and the creator becomes one with the work. In flow, dopamine stops chasing and starts creating. The reward is no longer applause or outcome. The reward is the act itself. But the chapter also gives a warning. Creative dopamine can become obsession if not regulated. Passion needs rhythm. Fire needs a frame. Genius without balance can become exhaustion. The lesson is powerful. Creativity is not only about inspiration, it is about rituals that help inspiration return. Chapter 10. The Discipline of Desire. Training dopamine for mastery teaches that desire must mature. Passion is easy at the beginning. A new idea, a new goal, a new project, a new dream. All of these can bring excitement, but mastery requires something deeper. It requires training dopamine to enjoy effort, repetition, structure, and refinement. This chapter shows that discipline is not suppression. Discipline is direction. It does not kill desire. It gives desire a path. The stories in this chapter show how rituals, boundaries, routines, and intentional friction can turn scattered energy into excellence. The craftsman does not depend on motivation. The craftsman depends on rhythm. One of the strongest messages of this chapter is that structure creates freedom. Without boundaries, dopamine becomes scattered. With boundaries, it becomes powerful. True freedom is not the absence of rules. It is the ability to move beautifully within the right ones. Chapter 11. The Art of Stillness. Dopamine and the power of inner calm brings the journey inward. After ambition, creativity, and discipline, the mind must learn stillness. This chapter explains that stillness is not laziness, it is neurological maintenance. When the brain is constantly stimulated, dopamine receptors become tired. Ordinary joys begin to feel dull. Silence restores sensitivity. Stillness gives the mind space to integrate. It allows ideas to connect. It lets the default mode network work quietly in the background. This is why many breakthroughs happen during walks, showers, quiet evenings, or moments when we are not forcing an answer. The chapter teaches the paradox of doing nothing. When we stop chasing results, insight often appears. Stillness does not end ambition. It teaches ambition how to breathe. Chapter 12. The Return of Meaning. Dopamine, Purpose, and the Human Story asks one of the deepest questions in the book. What happens after achievement? Many people reach a goal and feel an unexpected emptiness. The award is won. The target is reached. The dream becomes real. And then the mind asks, is this it? This chapter explains that dopamine can drive us toward success, but only meaning can keep us there. Success without purpose creates a post-reward void. Purpose stabilizes the system. Meaning is built when desire connects with contribution. When our work serves something beyond ego, dopamine becomes steadier. It no longer depends only on applause. It begins to reward impact, service, mentorship, creativity, and legacy. This chapter also challenges the myth of being self-made. It reminds us that every success is connected to other people: teachers, mentors, family, teams, friends, strangers, and those who believed in us when we were still becoming. Dopamine teaches us to chase, meaning teaches us to contribute. Chapter 13. The Still Flame. Sustaining meaning in a chaotic world brings the message into daily life. The world is loud. Notifications, deadlines, headlines, responsibilities, and digital noise constantly compete for our attention. Even meaningful work can become mechanical if we never pause to renew ourselves. This chapter teaches that meaning needs maintenance. Purpose is not something we find once and keep forever without care. It must be protected, renewed, and realigned. The formula is simple but powerful. Pause, reflect, realign, resume. The still flame represents a life where dopamine is no longer wild and restless, but steady and meaningful. It is the inner light that continues even when the world is noisy. The chapter teaches us that peace is not the absence of motion. Peace is the ability to remain steady within motion. And finally, the epilogue, the symphony within, completes the journey. The book began with dopamine as the unseen narrator behind ambition, craving, and desire. It ends with dopamine as an instrument in a larger symphony. Discipline gives the mind tempo. Stillness gives it tone. Purpose gives it melody. Meaning gives it harmony. The epilogue reminds us that the mind is not meant to be conquered, it is meant to be understood. Desire does not need to be destroyed, it needs to be refined. The chase does not need to be escaped, it needs to be understood until the chase and the calm become one. The final message is deeply human. The purpose of the chase was never only to arrive, it was to awaken the still flame within. So what does this book truly teach us? It teaches that dopamine is behind much of what makes us human: our dreams, distractions, ambitions, addictions, ideas, and achievements. But it also teaches that chemistry is not destiny. With awareness, we can edit the story. With discipline, we can train the desire. With stillness, we can restore sensitivity. With purpose, we can turn ambition into meaning. And with meaning, we can transform the chase into a life worth living. If this narration touched your mind, made you reflect, or helped you understand your own desires more clearly, then the full book will take you much deeper. In the complete book, you will find the full stories, detailed insights, chapter reflections, practical lessons, and the complete emotional journey from desire to discipline, from distraction to meaning, and from restless pursuit to inner harmony. You can buy Dopamine, the silent architect of desire, discipline, and meaning on Amazon, and experience the complete book in full detail. Thank you for listening. May your desire find direction. May your ambition find balance. May your stillness protect your meaning. And may the silent architect within you learn to build not just a successful life, but a meaningful one.